Ann Compton. Hey, Ann. You sound surprised.
I am surprised. Could I ask you about race?
You may.
Has the last 64 days been a relatively colorblind time?
I think that the last 64 days has been dominated by me trying to figure out how we're going to fix the economy. And that affects black, brown, and white. Obviously, at the inauguration, I think that there was justifiable pride on the part of the country that we had taken a step to move us beyond some of the searing legacies of racial discrimination in this country. But that lasted about a day.
In other words, yeah, sure, I'm the first black president and everything, but the race of the president, not the most important thing on anyone's mind if the country that person is president of melts. The president tonight in his second primetime press conference trying not only to explain what's happened to the economy, but what the plan is to save the economy, and, not incidentally, asking everyone to understand just how hard it's going to be to succeed, which is a tall order when we are hardwired as a country to get mad about short-term, relatively small scandals we can easily understand and can put on a bumper sticker if need be. As an example, the AIG bonus outrage over the last couple of weeks was like stage 2 in the 5 stages of grief and loss about the economy. First, there was denial. That would be the Bush-era, quote, recovery. Then there was stage 2, anger, AIG bonuses. Coming up next, stage 3, bargaining. As in, please, we're sort of done worrying about this Great Depression stuff. Please, we'll do anything. What do you want from us? This is where it might come in handy to actually have some idea of what we're talking about and what we're being asked to bargain away in our desperation. Matt Taibbi has a must-read explanatory piece on the mess that we're in the next issue of Rolling Stone. Must read. Do you want a taste? Quote, as complex as all the finances are, the politics aren't hard to follow. By creating an urgent crisis that can only be solved by those fluent in a language too complex for ordinary people to understand, the Wall Street crowd has turned the vast majority of Americans into non-participants in their own political future. There's a reason it used to be a crime in the Confederate States to teach a slave to read. Literacy is power. In the age of the credit default swap and the collateralized debt obligation, most of us are financial illiterates. Matt Taibbi's article in Rolling Stone is called The Big Takeover. Matt Taibbi joins us now. Hi, Matt. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Rachel. How's it going?
Good. You think the Obama administration should break the financial companies that are in crisis down? Stop letting them get so complex that they can't be understood and they can't be regulated. Why do you think that should happen?
Well, first of all, I'm obviously not an expert on any of this stuff, but I think on this one point, the logic here to me just doesn't seem all that hard to follow. If these companies are too big to fail, they're too big to exist. In a capitalist society, we can't have a situation where all you have to do to stay in business forever is get so big that whenever you screw up, the government comes and bails you out. That's the reason we had the trust busting and the anti-monopoly laws back in the day, and I think that's the reason we have to make sure that these companies are manageable and that if they are incompetent or irresponsible, that we can just let them fail.
Yeah. Matt, let me ask you about one specific thing. I'm about as comfortable with the intricacies of the financial world as the next schlub, which is to say not at all. But I think you've done a good job explaining it in this article. And I think you're right that we've got a responsibility to figure it out because people who do understand this stuff are going to roll us otherwise, or they already are. To that end, so to the point of explaining this so more people understand it, tell me about the Office of Thrift Supervision. This was the office that was like the cop in charge of overseeing AIG. How did they end up being the overseer?
Well, first of all, the Office of Thrift Supervision was actually created in response to the savings and loan crisis of the 80s. Okay. A thrift is just another word for a savings and loan. And in the wake of a series of deregulatory moves at the end of the 90s, AIG, like a lot of other companies, was allowed to basically choose its own regulator. All they had to do was open a thrift in one state. In this case, AIG opened one in Delaware, and they were able to designate themselves a thrift and then choose the OTS as its regulator. But the OTS is the smallest and weakest of all the government regulators. In fact, in the entire organization, they only have one insurance expert. And this is a company that regulates, AIG, Ameriprise, these massive insurance conglomerates.
So AIG got to choose to be regulated. AIG, the largest insurance company in the world at this point.
And the 18th largest company in the world.
Chose to be regulated by an agency that only had one insurance specialist on board.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I'd pick that agency too.
Right.
After the Depression, the Glass-Steagall Act said that banks can't do insurance and vice versa and other things.
Right, and commercial banks can't be investment banks as well.
So there's divisions between different types of institutions.
Exactly.
Phil Gramm wrote legislation in 1999 that killed that, right? And that was what allowed for the creation of these big, complicated Uber companies?
That's exactly right. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which was passed in 1999, essentially allowed Citigroup to be formed. It was a law that repealed the Glass-Steagall Act and allowed all of these companies to merge together. And that's why we have these companies that are so-called too-big-to-fail companies, because now we have insurance companies and investment banks and commercial banks all merged together into these gigantic conglomerates like Citi and like Bank of America now.
That we can't understand, that are too big to fail, and that can't be effectively regulated.
That's right.
Is the solution, broadly speaking, to stop believing that Wall Street guys, like Goldman Sachs guys, are the only ones who have the expertise to fix this? To just not defer our oversight to people who say we ought to trust them?
Well, I think it can be proven with scientific certainty that the one group of people that we know absolutely is not competent to lead us out of this crisis is that group of people.
Right.
They got us into this mess, and they've proven time and time again that their solutions to all of these problems are not the right solutions. I think we need a fresh look at this. I think we need to start doing some kind of new approach, and we really haven't done that. I think the Obama administration has chosen to pursue a policy that represents more continuity with the previous administration and Hank Paulson and all that crowd.
Yeah, it would be nice to see some cops in the cops and robber metaphor here.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Matt Taibbi, you have done the country a great service by reporting on this thing that I bet was no fun to report on. Thanks for doing it.
It was a nightmare. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Matt Taibbi's at Rolling Stone. His article on the financial bailout and the crisis that preceded it is in the next issue of Rolling Stone.